Mến chào tất cả quý vị khán thính giả đã vào diễn đàn phim Mai Vlog. Hôm nay là ngày 8 tháng 8 2024, giờ California là 2 giờ 51 phút buổi chiều. Đây là cái poll thăm dò ngày hôm nay giữa hai ứng cử viên, là ông cựu tổng thống Donald Trump cũng như bà đương kim phó tổng thống Kamala Harris, tranh cử cái ghế tổng thống cho 2024 vào tháng 11 này. Thì đây là cái poll này nó cũng mới vừa ra, thì mời quý anh chị em mà xem. Cái người nói là bằng tiếng Anh, tuy nhiên có phần phụ đề Việt ngữ ở trong đó. Và cảm ơn tất cả quý anh chị em.
Electoral map based on the single newest poll that has been conducted in every single state between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We will begin in Washington, where Kamala Harris leads by 14% according to the most recent poll. This is a Democratic internal poll, so it's likely that it overestimated support for the vice president, but nonetheless, it's still a 5-point drop from Biden's 19-point victory in 2020, and so Washington is just barely going to be a solid blue state. Oregon, though, isn't even going to be safe for the Democrats. Kamala Harris leads by just 5 percentage points, according to the only poll we have, and this is a very recent poll conducted after Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential election on July 21st. And so this is a pretty worrying sign for Democrats, as we have seen recent elections in Oregon go down to the wire. The governor's election here in 2022 was decided by a single-digit margin, and so despite Joe Biden winning Oregon by 16 points, it is only going to be a likely Democratic state for Kamala Harris. And finally, to finish off the West Coast, we have the golden state of California. This is Harris's home state. She served as a senator from the state for 4 years before becoming vice president, and she leads by 24% according to the most recent poll. So California obviously is going to remain in the solid Democratic category. Next up, in Nevada, Donald Trump has never won this state. He lost it in both 2016 and 2020 by the same exact 2.4% margin. And in 2024, he is the favorite. He's never been behind in a single poll from the Silver State, and when Joe Biden was still in the race, Trump was on track to win by a likely margin. And so as of right now, we have a tie for our most recent poll. So Nevada is going to be tilt Republican, as the next most recent poll has Trump leading by 1. So the Silver State is going to be a tilt Republican one on our map. Trump is still the favorite, but there's no doubt that it's going to be close. Flipping a state that you've never won before in the last 2 elections is pretty difficult, but it does seem like, at least as of this moment, that Trump is on track to doing so. Arizona is another state where Trump is favored, but the most recent poll here has Kamala Harris leading by 1%. Trump has still led in most of the polls conducted. This Bloomberg poll, it was honestly a terrible sample. Basically, every poll they did last week overestimated Democratic support. I honestly wouldn't weigh this poll very much at all. However, the most recent Redfield and Wilton poll shows Harris leading by 1%. It is unlikely, though, that she actually wins it, as in 2020, when Democrats were in a much better position nationally, Joe Biden only carried the state by 0.3 of a percentage point, and so Kamala Harris is very unlikely to outdo Biden, and so it really won't be that difficult for Trump to flip back the state. But for the purposes of this map, we're going to go with that most recent poll, and so Arizona is going to be tilt blue. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. Continuing on now with Colorado, we don't have any head-to-head polls between Harris and Trump here, but it is probably going to be a likely blue state. Joe Biden carried it by a solid 14-point margin 4 years ago. That's not going to happen again. The margin is going to be cut in half this time around. It's probably going to be a 7 to 10 point margin, and so the state of Colorado is going to be likely blue. However, we do have our first ever poll from New Mexico, which Republicans are trying to make more competitive, and so far it does seem like that's working. New Mexico went to Biden by 11 points, but Kamala Harris only leads by 7% in the most recent poll conducted in the state. Donald
2 screens, 1 laptop. Must be the new yoga book.
Yep, I can do homework or watch a movie.
You okay? What if your laptop could flex with you? Shop Lenovo at Best Buy.
Someone to have, someone to hold,
Trump could easily put this state into the lean Democratic category, but for right now, based on the polling, it is going to be likely for Kamala Harris. She's on track to win by just over 5 points. We're now going to fill in most of these states in the middle of the country. They're all going to be solid red. We have Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, as well as Kansas and Oklahoma easily going Donald Trump. The 2nd District of Nebraska is currently lean Republican. And in the states of Alaska and Hawaii, Trump is the clear favorite in Alaska, while Harris is on track to win the Aloha State. And next up in Texas, we have 40 electoral votes that are going to be very important for the Trump campaign. If Trump loses Texas, Republicans are going to have a major issue. However, that doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. Yes, there's been a lot of talk recently in recent years about Democrats somehow flipping the Lone Star State, but Republicans still have a very strong grip on it. Donald Trump, even when he didn't perform that well in 2020, he still won it by a likely margin. And today, Republicans are on track to carry Texas by a 13-point margin, according to the most recent poll. So Texas is not going to be lean, it's not going to be likely, but it's going to be a solid red state on our map. We're now going to move up to the Midwest, which is going to be where the election will be decided. Yes, some of these Sun Belt seats like North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada are important, but really it's the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania where the election will actually find its winner. If you look at these states, Kamala Harris has to win all of them if she really wants to stand a chance at crossing 270 electoral votes. Well, if Trump even just wins one out of these 3 states, the election is basically over. You can go home. Trump would be declared the winner. And so we're going to begin in Minnesota, which is Governor Tim Walz's home state. He was reelected in 2022, first elected in 2018, and he is going to give Kamala Harris a slight boost. Now, we don't have any polling since Walz was named the running mate. However, we do have some recent polls. Kamala Harris is definitely the favorite here. She leads by 5% according to the most recent poll, and so that will be enough to place Minnesota into the likely blue category. With Tim Walz now on the ticket, it is pretty likely that Minnesota is going to go to Kamala Harris by at least a 5-point margin. Walz, however, isn't really going to have too much of an impact outside of his home state, so outside of Minnesota, even in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, he isn't really going to benefit Harris all that much, which is why it probably would have been a smarter choice for the vice president to have chosen Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, just because of how vital Pennsylvania is to Harris's path to 270. Down in Iowa, we don't have any polling. That's just because of how solid of a red state it's become. Trump really transformed Iowa in the last 8 years. I mean, even in 2012, it went to Barack Obama by nearly 6 points, while Florida was tilt for the former president. However, in 2016, Trump flips Iowa. We see a 15-point swing to the right, and Iowa goes to Trump by nearly a double-digit margin, and in 2024, he is probably going to win it by at least 12. So Iowa will be solid red, as well as Indiana, while Illinois is going to be a solid blue state. The margin is probably going to fall in the 12 to 17% range. We don't have any polling. We're just going to have to wait and see, but Kamala Harris is no doubt the favorite in the state of Illinois. While up in Wisconsin, we have one of the most contentious elections anywhere on this map. According to the most recent poll, we have an even race. This poll conducted by Redfield and Wilton. However, the last poll conducted does show Kamala Harris leading by 1%. And now I would honestly take this with a huge grain of salt, because you have to consider the fact that in 2020, Joe Biden was supposed to win Wisconsin. This is on election day. He led by 8.4%. It was supposed to be a likely margin. He was supposed to basically blow Trump out of the water. In the end, he carried Wisconsin by 0.63%. If Kamala Harris can't even lead in Wisconsin by 5 points, she basically doesn't have too much of a chance at actually winning. Donald Trump has always outperformed expectations in the Rust Belt. I mean, just look at 2016. Nobody thought Trump was going to win states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. They were thought to be at least lean or likely blue, while states like Iowa and Ohio were thought to be in the very center. These states were what were believed to be the main battleground. Hillary Clinton barely visited Wisconsin. I believe she didn't visit it even a single time in the last 6 months leading up to the election. That shows how confident Democrats were because of how overpolled they were. And so right now on our map, we are going to fill in Wisconsin as being tilt blue. But if you're the Harris campaign, you have a lot more work to do before you can actually take the state back from Trump. In Michigan, though, Trump is the favorite. He leads by 1% according to the most recent poll. Every poll shows a close race, most of them with Trump ahead. And then there's just that one poll conducted by Morning Consult and Bloomberg that for some reason is saying that Harris leads by 12%. That is absolutely unrealistic. It is not going to happen. The last person to win Michigan by a solid margin was Obama back in 2008. That was when Democrats were in an unbelievably good position following the Great Recession. And so in 2024, I mean, this is just a completely unrealistic poll, which is why I said to really discredit that poll from Bloomberg and many of the other states that they did it in. And according to the most recent poll, Michigan is going to be a tilt Republican state. Donald Trump is the favorite here, and this is pretty concerning for Democrats, as out of the three blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Michigan is fundamentally the most liberal. So if Michigan goes, the rest are probably going to go to Trump as well. And just like in Wisconsin, look at the polling in 2020. Donald Trump was supposed to lose the Wolverine state by 7.9 percentage points. Eventually, Biden only came out with a 2.8% victory. So once again, Harris has a lot of work to do if she wants to flip Michigan, because as of right now, Donald Trump is the clear favorite. Ohio is going to be red as well, with the former president leading by 9% according to the most recent poll. Now, in the end, he's probably going to win by at least 12. Polls in Ohio underestimate Republican support as well. I mean, just look at 2020. Donald Trump was supposed to win by 0.8%. He eventually won the state by 8%, 10 times the predicted polling margin. So Ohio, it's pretty safe to say, will be solid red, but based solely on the polling data, it's going to be likely Republican. And to finish off the Midwest, we have the crucial state of Pennsylvania. At this point, things are already looking bad for Harris because she's lost Michigan. Even if she wins Wisconsin and Arizona, she still needs to win Pennsylvania. And currently, Pennsylvania is trending pretty well for Trump. Donald Trump leads by 2% in the most recent poll. Polling in Pennsylvania still does tend to overestimate Democrats, but it is not as bad as it is in Wisconsin and Michigan. Most of the recent polls have shown Trump with a lead. We even have some Democratic internal polls, this one conducted by Public Policy, that shows the former president leading by 1. And so the Keystone State will be lean Republican based on that most recent poll. If Harris had gone with Josh Shapiro, who is still a pretty popular governor in the state, he would probably lock up the state of Pennsylvania for Kamala Harris. But since she went with Walz, I guess she'll do better in Minnesota, which was a state she was already favored in. But that does leave a major risk of losing Pennsylvania, which would basically end her chances at winning the presidency. Moving up to the Midwest, we have some surprisingly competitive races, the first of which is in New York, a state that Joe Biden carried by 23 points 4 years ago. It's among the most liberal states in the country. The last time a Democrat won New York by less than a solid 12-point margin was Michael Dukakis in 1988. But today, Kamala Harris leads by just 12 points according to the latest Siena College poll. This poll conducted after Joe Biden dropped out, so any boost that Harris had following her entrance into the race, that really has been accounted for in this poll. We had a previous poll last month with Harris up by 11, so honestly, she's not performing nearly as well as Biden did 4 years ago.
This high-speed, portable, instant Wi-Fi hotspot provides a wider range of coverage than standard internet providers.
The Empire State is barely going to be a solid blue state, but really it's going to be nearly 2 times more competitive than it was in 2020. Now, there are many remaining states here that are going to be solid for Democrats. We have Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, as well as Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, while New Jersey is going to be likely blue. Bob Menendez has really hurt Democrats here. We have a competitive Senate race to replace him this November, and so Kamala Harris is probably going to win it by less than 12 points, considering Biden was only ahead by a single-digit margin before he dropped out, and he only carried the state by 16 points. A 4-point drop is more than reasonable. Up in New Hampshire, though, the Granite State was not too great for Trump in 2020. He lost it by 7 points, but in 2016, he almost flipped it. It was the second closest state in the election. Nobody really thought that would happen. Hillary Clinton came very close to losing New Hampshire. However, in 2024, Kamala Harris does lead by a 6-point margin in the most recent poll. All three of the most recent polls have the vice president ahead by 6, so honestly, she's doing fine. She's probably going to win the state. It's probably going to fall between a 4 to 6 point margin, but it's not really going to make too much of a difference. New Hampshire's 4 electoral votes aren't too particularly important. Maine, though, we have a huge shift. The 2nd district is now expected to be solid for Trump. He's expected to win by anywhere from 15 to 20 points, despite only carrying it by 7 in 2020. So the 2nd district will be solid red. The 1st district will remain solid blue, as it typically is, while the state as a whole, according to the most recent poll, Harris leads by 8%. This is pretty similar to Biden's 9-point victory here in 2020, so Harris is doing okay. It's going to be a likely blue state. It's 2 electoral votes going to the vice president. We're now left with just the southeastern quadrant, where Trump is going to win most of the states by a solid margin. He might be behind in electoral votes now, but just wait and see when we finish the map. In Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia, the former president is the heavy favorite and won all of these states by solid margins in 2020. We're now going to move on to Virginia, a state that Biden carried by a double-digit margin 4 years ago, but today, Donald Trump leads by 4%, according to the most recent poll. Things are not looking good for Democrats in Virginia. Now, honestly, Harris is still probably the favorite in this state, but based on the polling we have right now, Donald Trump is on track to flip Virginia and become the first Republican to win it since 2004. Ever since 2008 and Obama flipping Virginia, it's been a pretty blue state. Republicans didn't win any statewide offices in Virginia for a decade before Glenn Youngkin was elected in 2021, and now with Trump taking the lead in Virginia, it is a big sign that Republicans are starting to gain ground in the state once again. Next up, in North Carolina, the Tar Heel state was expected to go to Joe Biden in 2020. If you looked at the polling for that election, Biden was supposed to win by 1.8%, but instead he lost by a similar margin, 1.3%, to Donald Trump. Now today in 2024, Kamala Harris is behind by 3%, according to the most recent poll from the state. There's no doubt that Trump is the favorite here, and even if Kamala Harris wins the election, it's very unlikely he'll win North Carolina. Democrats only won this state once since 1976, and that was in 2008 when Obama carried it by a third of a percentage point. So North Carolina is going to be lean Republican on our map, and so will the state of Georgia. The Peach State actually went to Joe Biden in the last election. It was among the closest states in the country. It was actually the closest. The margin was lower in Georgia than in both Arizona and Wisconsin, the 3 tilt states we saw 4 years ago. And just like in Arizona, considering the worst position Democrats are in nationwide fundamentally than they were in 4 years ago when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, the economy wasn't looking too great towards the very end of Trump's term, and that's what really boosted Biden to be able to win states like Arizona and Georgia, but they don't have that advantage anymore. And when looking at the polling for 2024, Donald Trump is on track to flip Georgia back. He leads by 2 points in the most recent poll, so the Peach State is also going to be lean Republican. Finally, we have the Sunshine State of Florida. Its 30 electoral votes are going to be pretty big for Trump. It used to be a very competitive state. I mean, in 2020, Joe Biden was supposed to win. Every single poll had him leading, essentially, and there was never a single point in time throughout the 2020 campaign where Trump led in the polling average in Florida. But today, he leads by 6 points, according to the most recent poll, and even when he was supposed to lose in 2020, he still came out with a pretty big 3.4% victory. This was the biggest victory for anybody in Texas since the election of 2004. However, in 2024, Trump is going to outdo Bush and win it by at least 6 to 8 points. So Florida is going to be likely Republican, and based on the newest poll conducted in every single state, Trump is on track to win 305 electoral votes. Meanwhile, Harris is on track to win just 233, outdoing Hillary Clinton's performance by just 1 electoral vote. Thank you guys.
Thì cái poll ngày hôm nay đó thì Tổng thống Trump thì ông được 305 cái cử tri đoàn và Kamala Harris 233 cử tri đoàn á, thì chưa có tính Arizona, chỉ là Wisconsin. Thì đó là cái poll ngày hôm nay, mỗi ngày nó có sự tiến bộ. Thì mấy hôm nay thì bà Kamala Harris thì cái poll nó lên một chút, sau khi bà lựa chọn ông Tim Walz. Thì sau đó thì như là tuần tới 19 á, thì nó sẽ có cái tuần tới nữa sẽ cái đại hội của đảng Dân Chủ, thì bà sẽ tăng lên một chút nữa, rồi sau đó thì nó quân bình trở lại. Thì cái cuộc bầu cử này đó là nó cũng gây cấn đó, chứ không phải là thắng lớn một bên nào hết. Đó là theo cái poll hiện nay. Và cũng cảm ơn tất cả quý anh chị em đã vào